and welcome to a special investigative episode of the Fixing Football podcast with me, Martin Naylor, and I'm here with Liam O'Meara, and we're going to be talking about Barcelona. Mes Que Un Club, more than a club. There's been so much controversy about this football club in all the time that I've known of Barcelona. But Liam, I want to start with a question for you first. Who is the first player that comes to mind when you think of Barcelona?
Oh, it's almost split between two. I think of Lionel Messi, but then I also think of Ronaldinho as well. I'm very much in the split of those two.
I go straight to Rivaldo. That's the first one. That is like my first real acknowledgement of Barcelona was when Rivaldo was there. And that, so I had some questions. What is, when we're thinking about Barcelona and going back, not the first goal you remember, but what's the most, say, iconic kit you can think of? What year is the kit that you think of when you think of Barcelona in your head?
Probably, in terms of kit, again, there's probably two. I feel like I'm cheating with two. I'd say the Rivaldo one with the 1999-2000 half and half kit.
That's the one. Yeah.
And I also think of the one with Pep. I mean, it was the Neymar Suarez, where they had the fluorescent yellow trim.
Yeah.
On like the classic stripes. I think of those two kits, even though they're probably away from traditional Barcelona strips, actually, the two of them. But they're the two that like jumped to my mind.
Yeah, traditionally, that one. I also did like although I didn't like it at the time, but the Henry one with the gold letters on the back. I think that was a half and half one as well. Just after he joined. Right, and then...
That was the brighter blue, wasn't it, if I remember rightly?
It was, yeah. And I'm going to ask you to think back. What's a moment or a goal that you think of when you think of Barcelona?
Ooh. Two, and they're both Ronaldinho. One of them is the El Clasico, where he runs through. I think it was like on a Sunday afternoon where he beat three players and then just smashes it into the bottom corner.
So claps. That game.
Yeah. I remember watching that game. I think it was on like a Sunday afternoon when Liga was on Sky, and I was sort of blown away by both Real Madrid and Barcelona in that game. Just the magnitude of both those clubs. And the second one is Ronaldinho against Chelsea. The outside of the foot sort of snap out of nowhere.
It popped up again recently on my Instagram feed, that one, and it's deceiving in how spectacular it is. And I think the more you appreciate the game and the beautiful side of the game, the more you appreciate that goal. Because to the naked eye, it's a toe poke, but there's so much to it. There's so much more to it. It's just...
Again, I remember watching it live on ITV, and the way he celebrated, I've realised he'd done something special. Like, he sort of ran away with his arms sort of flicking with that smile, and you thought, he's absolutely done them there. And you see the replay of that standing... Carvalho, he stands up, isn't it?
I think it's two of them in it, but it's also like it's on checks near side.
Yeah.
And it doesn't move.
It doesn't read it at all because there's no backlift at all. So it doesn't... Yeah. It's almost... The shot doesn't register with better check until it's past him.
Yeah. It's... So I'll go to mine. I think of one of the Messi ones where he's dribbling. That's just... If I'm not really concentrating, but I go to like a Rivaldo overhead kick or something like that. Just... He was spectacular for me. He was like one of the first... He was like a great of the game. He was untouchable because you didn't get a lot of the Barcelona and La Liga other than Barcelona Real Madrid odd games on Sky back then. No. So when you would see that, or you'd see the Champions League, obviously, but yeah, Rivaldo was the one who sort of struck that for me. Now, I will get into Barcelona in 1 second, but we're pre-recording this, so we are a week in the past from when you're all listening to this. We've just come off the back of Champions League night, and it's going to be Arsenal v Real Madrid in the next round. I'm very excited about that. Barcelona will be at Dortmund, which are sort of similar style clubs. You think Bayern Munich is the Real Madrid of Germany, and Dortmund is very much the Barcelona of Germany. Not in terms of success, but I'm sort of turning it in terms of where the club is and the feel around the club. There's like I don't know. There's like a different vibe about Barcelona and Dortmund, I would say. You agree with that?
To an extent, I would say. I get where you're going with it. Not enough to argue the point. I don't, do you know what I mean? Not like I'll go with it.
Yeah. Barcelona looking good. Rafinha, current top goal scorer in the Champions League. Lewandowski's up there as well. I think they look really good in the Champions League at the moment.
Yeah, they're a brilliant team on paper. Somehow, which obviously we'll get into. But
yeah, somehow,
man for man, they're an absolutely brilliant team.
One of my favourite football matches of all time that I watched is it's a Clasico, and it was 4-2 to Real Madrid, where Michael Owen scored. Beckham put him through over the halfway line. It was just an unbelievable match. I think Zidane scored as well. Ronaldinho scored. Like, everyone scored and everyone played. It was just the ultimate legends and icons of the game at the time. It was just one of my favourite games that always sticks in my head. It's funny actually, you know the crest on Barcelona's badge?
Yes.
That features St. George's Cross. But yet, can you name me any Englishmen that have played for Barcelona?
Gary Lineker.
Yep. Can you name any more?
Englishman. I know Mark Hughes did, but he's Welsh.
Yeah, so no.
Did David Platt play for Barcelona?
No. Gary Lineker's the only one post-war.
Okay.
It's mad that. I know I would be amiss if I left out Kira Walsh and Lucy Bronze recently. But English men.
Yes.
Well,
fair enough.
Doing my research in Barcelona, they are more than a club and pioneers of the women's game and all sports. They're a multi-sports franchise, if you will.
A lot of those European clubs aren't they? Those multi-sport elements. You don't really get that over here, but they do get them over there.
Well, it's good. There's a point to that in treating like the women's team like you would treat the hockey team, or you would like treat the basketball team and stuff. They're not an extension of the men's football team. They're their own entity within Barcelona, and I like that approach. I think that's right.
There's quite a lot of English clubs that were cricket clubs as well, but then focused on one. Okay. That is part of a lot of clubs' history. I think, if I remember right, I think Manchester United were. I think Newton Heath was a football and cricket club.
Oh really?
Yeah, and then drop one of them. Cricket, clearly. I'd have to, do a bit of research into that, but I'm sure that's the case. It's usually cricket.
Anyway, right. The strip down memory lane's gone on long enough. Barcelona, 144,000 direct influences on decisions made at this club. They are the people's club of the area. But they have been not shy of a fair few issues over the last, let's say, 10 years, but we could go back further than that. Everyone knows about the Super League, but there's loads. There's like the Neymar transfer saga that was just crazy. You look at the tax stuff with Messi that was so dodgy. The Barca where there was like, was it that led to the resignation of is it Bartomeu, who was the president at the time?
Yeah, there was the financial raids, wasn't there?
Yeah, the just mismanagement. There was also issues with Luis Suarez, the Valverde sacking. There's just been loads over the years. With everything that great and magic about Barcelona, they have so much shit and dirt on themselves. Where would you like to start here?
Well, let's start with how they're structured, because you touched on this anyway. It is a fully membered-only club. Socios, they are. That terminology gets used quite a lot, and that's what essentially Barcelona members are. And the running of the club is elected presidents, and then quite similar to most democratic systems, a board elected off the back of that. And that is how they run,
isn't it? It's Juan Laporta at the moment, isn't it?
Laporta,
He was the president for a few years and got re-elected, I'm going to say, in 2021. I think, after a time away. That's just, I did a bit of research.
Fair, yeah, it's good. No, it's good. Yeah, they are elected clubs. Now, for me, and we'll get into everything individually, but a lot of the problems start here. Because if I was to ask you a question, mine, what's the biggest thing you hate about politicians?
We could be turning over some dark stories.
Like one thing that winds you up about politicians.
I don't know if this is going to be the right answer that you're looking for, but I hate that they are out for themselves. They're out for power, money, whatever. That's what I don't like.
And to get that, what will they do?
Yeah, they will please the crowd, if you will.
Correct.
They'll play to the audience.
Correct. And fundamentally, for me, Barcelona is almost like a microcosm of what is wrong with democracy. because essentially what happens is, despite all the issues that we're going to talk about, every elected president becomes elected because of big idea thinking. We're going to do X, Y, Z. We're not going to allow X, Y, Z to happen. And no one actually addresses the real issue, which is the mounting pile of debt. And this is fundamentally what the problem is that when people talk about how can Barcelona do X, Y, Z, why aren't Barcelona doing everything? It's because it's not the people that are in there are elected to be there. There is an end date to that. There is an exit date where they can leave the problem behind.
Do you like that, though? Do you like the fact that there is an elected official running the club? Do you think that's a model that could be applied in the Premier League?
Not in the Premier League. I think the horse is bolted in the Premier League.
The owners are too powerful with that. They're never going to give the running up of the club to someone who's elected by the fans, I wouldn't have thought.
No. Barcelona is something completely different than what we're used to in England, in terms of they are a symbol of that whole region of Catalonia. Like, they're almost an independence movement in themselves.
For sure.
So it's like a national team, essentially, of Catalonia. So that membership scheme has been there so long. They've risen to the top with the power of that. And it's very hard then for someone to replicate that in England. It's just not possible, really, now.
So let's talk about then their spending / overspending. I mean, everyone was made aware when they basically couldn't afford Messi anymore a few years ago. They couldn't afford a new contract. There was talk of players having wage cuts or having their wages deferred, and like Frankie de Jong was a big one that kept coming up at the time. This is all to do with La Liga's wages to turnover rules. I think that's right. So they were significantly in breach of that. And it does surprise me with some of the transfer fees they were paying, really.
100%. And I remember at the time, the podcast that we talk about quite a lot, which Duncan Castles at the time would have talked about. He talked a lot about the influence that Messi had on transfers. And that was a big reason to keep Messi. And one of the biggest issues that presidents had was none of them wanted to be the president that lost Lionel Messi. And Messi became more and more influential about players that he wanted around him. And it was really pushing the limits of what Barcelona could afford. But no one would dare challenge Lionel Messi. And this continued to avalanche, really.
Have we ever seen an example of player power like we've seen with Messi before?
No, I don't think I'd be very surprised if we do again.
It's crazy, isn't it? The amount of... I mean, to an extent, you think he's put out front and centre of everything. And in all fairness, everything that has been great about Barcelona over the last 15 years, he's been at the forefront of. So
100%.
He's earned it. He's the greatest player of all time. But
100%.
In saying that, we're going back to player power. So
also, Barcelona as well, at some point could have said no. And this is what comes back to that socios model again. An individual owner, may have made a difficult decision, knowing full well that he could tell everyone to suck it up, and he would have or she would have time to essentially change things and try and make the team successful in another way. I think an example, which is not comparable in some sense, but Coutinho, ironically, joining Barcelona from Liverpool. That at the time felt like a ridiculous transfer for Liverpool to do, because they were on the cusp of starting to compete with Man City. But they made that decision, and it was met not very well by Liverpool fans at the time.
Yes.
Now FSG can do that because they own it and they can then make their decisions. Whereas Barcelona, a president, has got another election in 2 years, and they, in their right campaign would be the president that lost Lionel Messi. And it always comes back to this, in my view.
Yeah, you see that when they're always campaigning for the next one. I remember at the time, like years and years ago, when they were hunting down Henry for years, and it was always to do with an election. Then it was Fabregas, who was the next one, like down the line. And there was always this big marquee signing who they needed to make for the elections and stuff. And there's always been one every couple of years. You said Coutinho, but then before him was Neymar. Griezmann came after Coutinho. And they're all over 100 million. Neymar's was ridiculous.
Ousmane
Dembele as well. Yeah, like we're saying. So all these are over 100 million euros transfers.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the Neymar one, actually, I'm thinking of him going to PSG. Neymar was from Santos, so maybe not. But still, there would have been a big image rights package, and God knows what else came with Neymar. The party that comes 100%. With Neymar. I was listening to, I think it was Kieran Maguire who spoke about the clause that Neymar had in his contract that once a month, 8 of his friends from Brazil would get flown over to Barcelona for a party. It was one of his one of the clauses in his contract. Isn't it? Did you see he's injured again as well for his sister's birthday? Even though he's gone back to Brazil. He's still injured this weekend for his sister's birthday.
Of course he is.
One of the biggest conspiracies in football. So, for the eagle-eyed amongst our listeners, they'll have noticed that Barcelona have been playing in not the new camp for the last couple, is it about 18 months now? They'll be moving to the Spotify rebranded new camp in next, I don't know, maybe it's another 18 months. I'm not sure when that's due to be completed, but currently playing at the Olympic Stadium. Is this tied to the money thing? I know Spotify have been putting a lot of money in, and you'll see Spotify on the new Barcelona shirts. Daniel Ek has been very involved with them since not being able to get any handle on Arsenal in that whole Super League draft. He went over to Spain and probably is enjoying himself a bit more than what he would be in North London. But this is going to be... There's two things here. There's the whole stuff with the new stadium, and then there's the whole levers thing that we were speaking about people may have heard about when all these financial things were going on, like selling the training ground and selling these naming rights and stuff like that. Can you explain a little bit about that? Because we just heard levers, and I think we're all just presumed to understand what that meant. And
yeah, so I'll start with the stadium situation and Spotify. I have never seen a sponsor more prominent than Spotify with Barcelona. Any image you see of Barcelona, you see a massive Barcelona-coloured Spotify logo behind them at the training ground. It's outrageous. The only comparable is that Liverpool training ground pitch that they have, where it's massive, like standard bank behind them. It's ridiculous advertising. And it is quite galling when you think about the fact that it took Barcelona so long to get involved with sponsors. They were reluctant on that for so long. Yeah,
famously there was without sponsor, and they had the only one I think when they went back on it was to have UNICEF on the shirt, and all that was going to them. Did you know that the Coldplay branded Spotify shirt from earlier this season is the highest selling football shirt of all time?
Okay.
How crazy is that?
I didn't know that, but it's not a huge shock. It's quite a interesting sort of branding.
It's like a weird thing. So now instead of one Barcelona shirt you can buy, there's various versions you'll buy, because Spotify will then rebrand it, and every couple of months there'll be a new album out, and you'll be able to get the latest Joe Rogan episode on the front of a Barcelona shirt, or whatever, Bruno Mars album, whatever it's going to be. So yeah, interesting way of leverage.
100%. And going back to the stadium, it touches base into what we talked about, what will be a couple of weeks ago when we put this one out, when we talked about Man United. It's accessing new revenues. When you talk about wage to turnover, a big way of pushing your turnover up is not only to have a stadium that's full every single week. And Barcelona was starting to waver a little bit on its attendances than maybe what we traditionally knew them to be when the Messi years. But enhancing the stadium experience should see to that. It's not easy to fill 100,000 every week. So, and also touching on what we talked about in the Man United when we talked about them a couple of weeks back, the corporate element. touching well into that football tourism corporate element of it, really hammering that home, and that is a massive way on getting your revenues up. So go on.
No, I was going to say, I think we'll get into that Man United stuff again, because since we last recorded, obviously the plans have been released for the new Old Trafford, the Trafford Butlins, however it looks, whatever people have been calling it online. You can find plenty of memes about the new Man United situation. But yeah, the corporate side, the multi-event space, that everything that goes with it is just got to be part of them generating money. Another way they've been generating money that have been quite controversial, shall I say, is offloading players from their pride and joy, La Masia. Or La Masia, however people want to
I've always gone with La Masia. But
I think La Masia is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. I think La Masia is what most people in England. I think La Masia is, well, I don't know the correct one. It's definitely not going to sound correct coming out with our accent. But
no, I don't think
I've always gone with La Masia.
Right, I'm going to speak to you about La Masia in just a few minutes, because it's time for a break. While we're on a break, over 50% of people who listen to this aren't subscribed yet.
What?
It was a massive favour, everyone. While we're having, just go get yourselves a drink, or pull over in the car, pull into the garage, get yourselves a drink, click that subscribe button, and then we'll be back in a few minutes. And we are back. I got myself a nice drink, and I want to keep talking about Barcelona. There's loads of stuff about La Masia, the player registration stuff that we'll touch on in a moment. Just talk to me about the people being pissed off with offloading academy talents. I mean, we can look at Chelsea as an example for that, but Barcelona is a one because people are so connected to it.
Well, it's the most famous academy in football, despite what West Ham seem to think. It's
I'd say that and like Clairefontaine. Although I don't really understand the deal with Clairefontaine, because it's like a national academy, isn't it? The French one.
Oh, but that's a separate podcast on its own. But Clairefontaine is basically the idea that St George's Park's built on.
Yeah.
The idea of the French success of the early to late 90s, that period of when they rose to prominence. Really, it was all due to standardization of their sporting program. That's a very different but yet quite interesting topic that we might do another day when we talk about England, maybe. But
I think so.
With La Masia, or West Ham's Academy of Football, both famous claret and blue academies, it is possibly the jewel in the crown. And you're talking a part of the world, maybe alongside Paris, that produces the most gifted footballers in quite a small part of the world. And very famously of that Barcelona style of what we now know to call tiki-taka, but has essentially been there for years and years and years, probably since Cruyff sort of revolutionised that academy.
Yeah, it all stems from Cruyff, doesn't it? Everything that comes with it. And I think that's why people are so connected with it, because people who Cruyff took under his wing, you don't have to look as far as, I don't know. We can just go down straight to Pep, who was under him for a time at Barcelona, as a player and as a mentor, and however else we want to be it. And then the trickle down from that, and just it passed down from generation, which a lot of clubs haven't done as well in keeping former players as involved. Ajax do this really well and keep their former players involved, and try and keep a tradition surrounding the club and stuff like that. And I think that obviously when you've got highly talented players being coached by highly talented and skilled individuals. Yeah,
there are some clubs it's easier to do, and I think quite interestingly, not to go off topic too far, it seems like PSG have finally realised this, that potentially is the way to go for them as well. And for 100%. Me, they look a fantastic team this year. They could easily. Well, I mean, it said on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, they could not easily, it's well hard, but they could win the Champions League this year with a team that theoretically the biggest superstar in that team is possibly Ousmane Dembele. So it's quite a turnaround, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'd forgot that we'd beat them already this year.
Yeah.
We beat them earlier in the Champions League, and they've just, I think since January especially, they've just kicked on into another gear, so that they'll be a real big problem for anyone in there.
That midfield's so good to watch.
Is it João Neves?
João Neves, Vitinha. Oh, they're so
Ruiz,
good.
Yeah, they've got a special...
So good.
Anyway.
But yeah, anyway, La Masia. Yeah, for all those reasons, and I think more recently, that famous Rijkaard Pep team of built on the academy, so built from the B team as well. A lot of these players were prominent B team players.
Yeah.
And manager, including Pep himself. And that midfield three of Busquets, Xavi and Iniesta, Piqué, Puyol. I think Jordi Alba came back. He was originally La Masia. So these players, it meant more, that team. And that, for me, that is the best team that I've seen alive. And I don't think City matches that based on that midfield that I just mentioned. And obviously Lionel Messi as well. But that was almost built in Barcelona.
Yeah.
So there is always a feeling that could be done again. So I think whenever they do sell any of the academy players, it almost strips the soul of that club now. Yeah,
and you can see why people are super pissed off about it. And you can see that rings true for any academy. When you see people come through, I mean, you was annoyed at me when I was sad to see Emil Smith-Rowe go, but like he's one of the academy. I'm not putting him in a La Masia category, but he's an academy lad who comes through and
let him free. That was all I was saying. You weren't playing him.
Yeah, no, and it was right to go, and it was just sad to see him go.
Yeah, he's doing
it's
well.
Just one of them.
It's a good club. He's doing well. Worst places to play than Fulham.
For sure. So, yeah, you can understand why people... But it was also like the selling of the training ground as a part of a lever that was annoying people, or it was seen...
The levers are a different thing altogether. Levers is quite interesting because what they've essentially done in a lot of different ways, including Barcelona TV and future broadcast deals and this type of stuff, is they've sold future revenue. It's almost like they've taken a loan out, really.
Yeah,
because these are guaranteed earnings that they would get in the future.
Yeah, because they needed that cash. They were in big trouble. They were looking at legal action. They were looking at points deductions. They were looking at having to give players away for free.
But the
like
problem
Frankie
is,
de Jong on €340 a week.
Well, this is it, right? And this is where the challenge goes, because to me, there's nothing wrong with leverage. The levers for like leveraging your future earnings. I've got, it's at times in life you need to do that, but some of the reasons that we're doing it is where I think that the problematic side comes in. Now, don't get me wrong, right? Yes, they were doing it to sign players, and at the time, and even to a degree now, I do admire the determination to stay at the top. Like, no matter what, we are Barcelona. We are not letting Real Madrid get away from us. I actually do admire that fierceness, determination.
It's a little bit like if you compare it to Man United, but they've just let things dwindle away and get worse and worse. They're like, no, fuck this, we're going to doubling down.
I think Arsenal's a better example in the sense that you didn't quite let things... Well, you did a little bit with a stadium move and then the spending that you did to pay for the stadium. And you could argue you cut your cloth accordingly, but how hard has it been to try and get back to the top table?
It took 10 years. It's a 10-year cycle of absolute pain and fucking being a banter club in every WhatsApp group going.
Exactly. And you would argue you've probably ended up spending that money that you could have done before anyway, just in a shorter space of time to get up there. Like your 100 million on Declan Rice. Could you have spent less to keep yourself ticking up? And look, it's not about Arsenal, but Barcelona are trying frantically to maintain that challenge. And theoretically, they could win La Liga this year. They were in a race last year. They got a good chance in the Champions League this year, particularly the way the draw's fallen for them.
Yep.
Although they might face Bayern Munich and they're like their absolute arch nemesis. That could be 30-0 whenever they play each other.
Either way.
Yeah.
I actually fancy Inter to get through against Bayern and then to also beat Barcelona if that was the case.
Maybe. I think the three very evenly matched teams, but very different teams, if that makes sense.
Very much so. Yeah, I agree. So, the levers, we've spoken about that. I wanted to talk about how have they been able to keep signing players and they're sort of linked, but then they come to the issues that we saw with Danny Olmo, where people were thinking, January, Danny Olmo, he can't even play for him anymore. Like, what's going on? They just bought him for 60 million euros, and now he can't play for him.
This is all a mess. And to be fair, this has changed quite slightly since we did our original notes on this. So I'm going to be diverting away from my notes a little bit to what I remember. But essentially, what it comes down to is that with these wages to turnover rules, there are some mitigating circumstances that allow you to make signings, even if you're in breach. And some of those relate to injuries. Some of those relate to being away on international duty with Olympics or whatever. So the issue is, I believe that on the first half of the season, Danny Olmo was registered on the back of Christensen being injured.
Right, okay.
But he was registered, though. But because he comes back from injury, that doesn't mean that... it doesn't mean that they can swap it or they can choose which one they have. It means that because Danny Olmo was the...
Last in, first out, yeah.
Exactly. Look, and if I've got this wrong, then I don't think any Barcelona fans will be listening, so people let me off. But essentially, Barcelona disputed this on a couple of technicality grounds. And I believe that as part of on one of their appeals, which I think was to Spanish courts, they got basically a stay of execution whilst it gets investigated by them. And I think it's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because, are you denying someone their ability to work? Although they're getting paid anyway. So I don't know. It's quite an interesting sort of range of topics, I think. But it just doesn't look very good.
There always seems to be like some loophole that they're exposing, or some back passage in like just some back route, back door, whatever you want to call it.
Well, this is it. I think it does quite a lot of reputational damage. I don't think Barcelona care hugely about that. But
yes. Go on. I was going to say that, but they probably don't care. A sign of that is them still being involved in the potential Super League stuff that has been trickling on ever since the English teams pulled out of whatever that is looking like. That Barcelona are still heavily involved with Real Madrid and
is it Juventus?
I think, yeah.
I'd be surprised if English clubs aren't really secretly involved in that still. But I actually understand the Super League argument from the what do we call them, the historic sort of big European super clubs. I kind of get it from their position when you compare it towards the earnings of the Premier League in comparison to their deals that are continuously going down. I kind of understand this idea that they need it to survive.
Yeah, they need it. We don't need it. And that's, yeah, I get it, but no one's...
Well, don't mean we have to like it, but I think they've got more of a case than, let's say, Man United have. I understand it from their perspective, but, the new Champions League layout should be helpful. If they can qualify for the Club World Cup, that could be helpful, as an incentive for Barcelona to win the Champions League this year. That would help a lot of their problems. But
are they in the Club World Cup in the summer?
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are.
I don't think they are. They're not. I mean, when was the last time they won it? It'll be...
Oh, it's definitely not in the last 3 to 5 years.
No, Messi won 2, didn't he? And that'd be the last one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think, you're right, yeah.
Gotta be. I hate if that's wrong.
Yeah, so last 3 Champions Leagues would have been Real Madrid, City, and Chelsea.
Just Bayern Munich are there as well, aren't they?
Somehow.
Right, Harry Kane, going to bring it home. Bring the World Cup home.
Are we potentially going to see the sale of... This is going a little back to La Masia, but the sale of, the really, really fascinating Lamine Yamal or Pedri or Gavi, one of these youngsters who've come through the academy? Are we looking at the sale of one of them to perhaps save Barcelona's future?
Well, I mean, this is the Fixing Football podcast, Martin, and I think we're getting to the crux of the matter here because, well, yeah, I mean, that is, if you look at it from how can you fix Barcelona quickly? If you sell Gavi, Pedri, Yamal, is it Gascari? I can't remember the other young lad.
Oh, yeah.
Then you probably raise nearly £1 billion.
Yeah, you're looking at it. If you could find someone to buy what you mean Lamal's probably worth right now, what we're looking at, what would you say? Let's just round ball it at 200 million euros.
200 to 250 million. Even in this broken market, I think a Chelsea pays 200 million euros for him.
Yeah.
Even PSG, who are moving on, would look at someone at that age, I think. 17,
who's just... It looks like he's got the world at his feet. I love Pedri and Gavi as well. I think there's so much to them too.
Yeah, Pedri, for me, is a sort of silent Ballon d'Or level player.
Yeah.
But, yeah, because that is the fix. And then you essentially can do one of two things. You can look towards the academy for the next bunch, of which there undoubtedly will be some high-quality players in there.
There always is.
Or you're Barcelona, you dip into the free market. And who's available on a free this summer? Who can they potentially bring in? You've got... like, for example, if they were to sell Gavi and bring in Kimmich, they're probably going to be what? £200 million up?
Yeah. What if they sold Yumi Lamal and brought in Mo Salah?
This is whether they want to go down this route, but it would make a huge difference.
I think there would be a lot of sting, especially Yamal. There's so much hype about him that I think it would really kill a lot of the fans. But
this is the problem. And it comes back to that thing again, right at the start of the podcast.
About the president, yeah.
About the president. Would an owner or an ownership group make that difficult decision, do you think?
Well, it's the thing. The other thing, what I'm going to say about this from a player like Yamal is he's so young. And we saw with Fabregas and Piqué, the attraction of Barcelona and it being their natural home is so enticing that what is 3 to 4 years in the Premier League for Yamal going to do to stop him going back to Barcelona at 21 seeing out his first contract and then going? That might be in the plans for them. You never know.
The thing is as well, I don't want to sound super crude about La Liga because I've loved watching La Liga over the years, but it's not the same league as it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
especially 5 to 10 years ago. So if you were to take a hit, and you're probably still going to be a Champions League level club. Even if you were to really take a hit and look at some of the and working maybe cheap on. You talked about Rafinha being the best player earlier. That was a £20-odd million signing from Leeds.
Yeah. He's captain now. I can't believe that. Every time I see it, I'm like, what's happening?
He looks brilliant whenever I watch him. Looks really dynamic, especially when he's running through the middle. But it just makes you think, like, if you could just accept a bit of pain for a few seasons of Real Madrid winning the league, or Atletico maybe winning the league, you could come when you're in that new stadium. You could be a completely different club. But
you're right. You make a really good point. The strength of La Liga means that they'll probably still be in the Champions League and still be on that £1 billion prize pot that's going around.
Exactly, and they can still get that wages to turnover sorted in a position where they've got they can build a 4 or 5 year plan to return up. And it sort of contradicts what I said earlier about this idea of spending to keep in it. But the problem is that they're at the point where the bubble is bursting, really. Like it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
And a new stadium on its own doesn't fix it with that debt pile. If you're not going to have a situation where there's private equity into the club.
So we discussed fixes sort of then as that being one of the main ones, arguably the quickest. The other ones that are coming in and look at the future La Liga plans on their spending rules. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because I'm not really clued up on this one.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm less clued up, but I believe there is talk about in La Liga of relaxing this a little bit on the basis that essentially there's international investments all coming into English clubs at the moment because of, even with England's stricter PSR rules, they're still more or less in line with UEFA's rules, whereas Spain have these higher turnover rules. It's much harder to enter the top table in Spain than it is into England. If you look at someone like Nottingham Forest, this feels like it's a lot more likely now than it was maybe 5-10 years ago in England. And I think that's partly due to the demise of Europe, that these Premier League teams that we would know could call traditionally these sort of mid-level Premier League teams are able now to bring in top European talent. Like if you look at, I always think West Ham's an interesting case. If you look at the players that are through that West Ham team that is massively underperforming, they've got really highly rated European talent like Kudus, Paqueta. I know they're not. I know Paqueta's Brazilian, but they was playing on the continent. Is my point. They were able to pick these up from really top clubs to play for West Ham.
You know, Rivaldo's at PSG. Yeah, totally agree. So and then obviously the stadium as well is part of their fix. It's part of that getting the money in for them. That's going to be coming in as well.
100%. I mean that's there ready to be done, and I think most European top clubs that don't have a new stadium are very much investigating it. It's just a way to get that revenue. It's not necessarily about the cost of the stadium because you can offset that in different ways off your books. It's more about the revenue that allows you to bring in, because then that can essentially, under all the spending rules, you can then affect who you can then invest into the squad.
Good question. Bit of a side one from the ones that I had written down, but why is it the strength of the Premier League that is stopping foreign investment, let's say, into clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona? Now, I know they have the big sponsorship deals and they're the biggest generating clubs, but we haven't seen an attempt from like a Qatar or an American billionaire come in and try and we're seeing it with Spotify, maybe is trying to integrate themselves into Barcelona, but there's no one to come in and say, like, we want to buy Barcelona. No, have I missed that? Have we just seen them sort of thoughts rebuffed by the fans and by the current ownership setup that they've got?
No, it will be there. It just won't be as prominent in news story. I know there have been some international investment. I think Mallorca's owned by US consortium and stuff like that. There have been examples of it. I just think in England and sort of, or in the English league specifically, there's just more room at the top table where the revenues are really high, and the Premier League revenues are only going one way, whereas the rest of the continent is stagnating. And as well, sort of coming back to that point of Real Madrid and Barcelona, it's so much harder to get to that top table. Whereas in the Premier League this year, you've got 5 Champions League places, and Tottenham and United are nowhere to be seen. So all of a sudden, and Man City are like clinging on to it. So all of a sudden, you've got 2/3 places that could be available, and that's even before Aston Villa potentially win the thing, and it could be even 6. So, or even United or Tottenham win the Europa League when this goes out. That might not be the case for both of them. I hope that is how that plays out.
So if Aston Villa win it but finish outside the top 5, there'll be 6 spots then.
Yeah, but then if United or Tottenham were to win, that's Jesus 7. It could be 7 English teams.
Southampton will be getting a European spot this rate.
Well, I read, and I saw it as a headline, so I didn't read it into too much detail, but it seemed right that there is a scenario that plays out where 11 English teams could be in Europe next year.
That's incredible.
I think so. I'm a big believer. We've talked about this before, but I think more people. I don't think European football should be exclusive for the teams at the top. It's a far more. The world is different now. You can travel to Europe for nothing. Like European football should be more open, but that's a completely different topic.
Now, one thing I didn't touch on, and it's only because lack of knowledge and possibly just putting a bit of a downer on the episode, but it was all the legal raids and stuff on the Barcelona officials, because it gets a bit murky then. And I already have my thoughts on Barcelona are very mixed. Always love watching them. I don't think anyone doesn't love watching them. But there's always this there's always something going on in the background, I feel like, and I don't want that to taint like this legacy, this legend of the club, because what you see on the pitch is, for the last 30 years, it's been some of the greatest football we will ever see. No, and
obviously I don't want to talk about things that we don't know inside out, and I don't know exactly where each of these cases are up to, but I think it'd be wrong to talk about Barcelona and not nod to the fact that there have been raids, like you mentioned with Bartomeu. There has been the investigation with the payments to a referee advisor that Barcelona had.
Yeah.
with regards to setting dossiers on referees. So, allegedly, of course. Again, I'm not going into too much detail on it because I don't know it inside out, and it'd be wrong to. But we would be amiss not to sort of nudge towards that, and that you do feel that every 6 to 12 months there's some other news story about Barcelona.
Crazy. What a crazy football club, Liam.
I know. Amazing, really. Amazing.
It is amazing that they're still standing somehow, and there hasn't been crazy legal ramifications against them. It just seems like every time there is some sort of legal attempt on their livelihood, they just bat it away and sign someone.
Yeah, whenever you read or watch anything to do with Barcelona, you realise just how fascinating it all is, and how when they say Mes Que Un Club, but it is like it's nuts. And the one that I watched recently, I think we talked about it in a previous podcast, is I watched the Figo film about his transfer from Barcelona to Real Madrid.
Oh, yeah.
And that really made me sort of see like how Barcelona sort of sees itself, and the idea of someone making that move, like it completely sort of, everyone lost their minds over it. Do you know what I mean?
So mad that I remember the famous pig's head on the pitch, because it was in one of like the first couple of weeks as well, coming to when they were playing back at the new camp. It was crazy. That was I think R9 Ronaldo got away with it a little bit because he went to Inter in between.
Oh, 100%. I mean, R9 perfected it a little bit, didn't he? Inter, AC. But
played for every rival, yeah. Right. I think we need to wrap it up there. Any closing thoughts on Barcelona, Liam?
No, just fundamentally democracy doesn't work.
Not at football level.
Well, yeah, especially football level.
Right, let's wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed that one. We've been wanting to do a big sort of deep dive on Barcelona for a while, and I don't think we've scratched the surface really with some of the stories we could have gone into. I mentioned at the beginning stuff with like Neymar and just even the tax thing with Messi. They're all podcasting themselves. So
yeah, and also let us know if you like this one, because we'll do more of this kind of thing. If this was, we can do profiles of clubs and what's going on at certain clubs. Barcelona's a pretty good one, but there are other clubs with other things going on. So if you thought this was good, then let us know. Yeah, we started right at the top, so I would like to do this again. We'll get people involved. We'll talk about whoever club what comes to. So put your thoughts in the comments, like, share, subscribe, do whatever you feel, and get in touch. All the information is at www.fixingfootballpodcast.com, and you can find all the information there. Thanks a lot, Liam. Thank you. Catch you later. Bye, everyone. Goodbye.